So they are told that they're going to be randomized to either continue on their same dose of medication that helped them so much, or to a sugar pill. So what happened at the point of randomization is that both of the groups actually lost clinical effect. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the chemical was not actually doing something beyond what that individual believed it was doing. And when they stopped believing it because they were worried that they might have gotten the sugar pill, it actually stopped conferring what they experienced as a benefit. So that's how the negative belief can have a measurable, statistically significant.
Greetings and welcome to the Dr. Espen podcast. I'm Espen. Today I have the privilege of having a conversation that I've been waiting to have for quite some time. Today I'm interviewing Dr. Kelly Brogan, MD. We're going to have a conversation about anything from how the mind works, psychosomatic disease, how the body works, and also deep and profound aspects around the conversation of spirituality. Dr. Kelly Brogan has an undergraduate diploma from MIT, where she studied cognitive neuroscience. She graduated from Cornell Medical School and began her work in reproductive psychiatry. There's a great interest in that topic, understanding what that means. So stay tuned, because I think in this conversation, we're really going to unpack the power of the mind, the power of the mind's influence over the body, in terms of potential psychosomatic disease and, as I call them, issues in the tissues, and what we actually can do to live incredible, healthy, vibrant lives. As Dr. Kelly has had a strong interest in the interface between medicine and psychiatry, it led her to pursue her fellowship in the consultation/liaison of psychosomatic medicine at Bellevue VA Hospital. She's she is board certified in psychiatry, psychosomatic medicine.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. Good, good for you.
They took it. They took that and my New York license. That's a whole funny story, but yeah, no, not anymore.
Maybe we get into that. That's even better.
You know, it's funny. I have experienced a fair amount of censorship, deplatforming, kicked off of Facebook, PayPal, Venmo, shadow banned on Instagram, and the licensure issue. I still am technically licensed in one state, but it was such an interesting window into the witch hunt of these agreements, right? Because licenses are contracts, and they are not contracts that we often enter with full awareness of, what it is that we're participating in. And I was accused after having closed my practice. So I closed my practice in New York City back in 2018. And so I was accused of not complying with COVID protocols in my New York office by a patient that I had not seen because I didn't have a practice during the pandemic. And in order for me to defend myself, I would have had to enter into an in-person litigation experience up in New York. And I was advised, that I probably would lose because of my public facing perspectives, shall we say, right? That would have been dragged in as evidence that I am, generally a disobedient professional. And so I got to really see wow, they just do what they want. They just do what they want. And it's their sandbox. And that's the same feeling that I have with social media. I'm playing in their sandbox. So I could get all, sort of victim-y about it. But in the end, it's that Bucky Fuller quote I like to invoke, which I paraphrase to say, you can't change the system from within. You have to build a new one that renders it obsolete. And that really also drains a lot of the victim petulance that would otherwise arise. And in the end, it's inconsequential to me. I don't really care other than the principle. I can be a very principled person. So it did bother me for a moment. But yeah, that's been a funny little sideshow going on the past couple of years.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I said to Kelly before we pressed record on this interview, I said, thank you so much for what you have done. I speak for myself in this regard when I say that there has been a lot of things changing over the last 5-6 years um, in the world of medicine, in the world of so-called healthcare, in the world of many things. And so I have witnessed Kelly's way of showing up and speaking her truth. And in doing so, I wanted to acknowledge that. And it's interesting because I myself have had the privilege of owning 10 multidisciplinary health practices from, with anything from chiropractors to dentists to medical doctors, etc. And I shut my last practice down around the time of 2020, let's put it that way, just because I'm not willing to play the game where the rules are absolutely planned out and just, what a scam. Having said that, not negating that horrible things happen and people got on well, etc. So lots of love and compassion to everyone out there. But I think we all can agree that things have changed, and we're going to perhaps a bit of a different view upon the so-called system. But today's not a conversation about that. Today's a conversation about what we can do to empower ourselves to live amazing, healthy, vibrant lives. And Kelly has got an amazing experience in this, in not just clinical practice, but also in her research and her experience in this field. So I want to start right off the bat there, Kelly, if I can. You talk a lot about the psychiatry, the mind-body connection, and also, psychosomatic illnesses or diseases. I want to find out what role, and I think this is a given for some people, but not for everybody. I want to really go deep. How much of a role does the mind, does our thoughts, our patterns, our programs and beliefs play in our overall well-being when it comes to health, etc.?
Yeah. So I was trained in the sort of biomechanical model of mental health and so-called illness. And so I was trained to believe that we are probably born with, although the literature is very sparse to actually suggest that, we're probably born with some sort of a genetic problem that exposes itself under stress at some point in life. And that's when you see that you have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or panic attacks or ADHD or depression, right? And it's referred to as the monoamine hypothesis, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, like the serotonin theory of depression. So you have these chemicals, and if the buttons and levers are not functioning quite right, then you develop symptoms, and you need exogenous chemicals to help you to balance that out and manage that. And of course, you need that for life, because this is just how you are. You are broken. Your brain is broken. And that's what I learned. And it's very, deterministic. It's just sort of the way it is. And so you better be a good patient, take your pills, and come to your appointments. So when I specialized, as you mentioned, in consultation liaison psychiatry, it's also called psychosomatic medicine. Believe it or not, this is in the conventional world. What I specialized in was being a psychiatric consultant to other kinds of doctors, right? So you're a surgeon, your patient is delirious, they would call me to come comment essentially on what medications to recommend, which was usually antipsychotics, for example, or sedatives. And my specific specialty was in consulting to obstetricians and gynecologists. So I would help to determine what medications were relatively safe to take for a pregnant or breastfeeding woman, right? So I was one of the first 300 to actually specialize in this. That's how much I believed that pharmaceuticals were the only answer, the only responsible choice. And so the idea was already available to me that psychiatric phenomena, right? So that symptoms in the cognitive, mood, or behavioral realm can arise because of like medical issues, right? So I basically just took that farther when I had a rupture with the system. So the rupture with the system that I had was postpartum my first pregnancy. This is very common. If you talk to renegade MDs, it's usually a rupture with the system personally that we experienced that set us off on our journey off into the wild unknown, away from the comforts of this parentified system. And so when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's on like a routine physical postpartum, I was unwilling to take a prescription for the rest of my life, and had lived a rather unconscious life up until that point, ate junk food regularly, took birth control for many years, never exercised. I mean, I've always loved to dance, but I never really exercised, never even like heard of meditating. It wasn't even in my world view, and dyed my hair black, like all the things. And so the idea of taking a prescription just seemed like, I don't want to deal with that, honestly. But that introduced me to the available options. And the only one that I knew was a potential escape hatch was to consult with somebody who had, experience resolving these problems. I'd never been exposed to this, right? That the idea that you could resolve symptoms just so you could manage them. So I went to see a naturopath, which is, my angels delivered me there because there's no other explanation. And because it was not a part of my accepted, sort of protocol of behavioral options. So I went to see a naturopath, put it into remission by changing two things about my diet. I took out gluten and I took out dairy. That's like literally it. And I watched in black and white on paper, my antibodies go from the high 2000s, my TSH in the 20s, and I watched it normalize. And so you would think that I would have been, so excited that I was well, and I felt so different, right? Digestively, my mind, I felt so different. And instead, like a rage was uncorked inside of me. Like literally Medusa came out from the catacombs, and I became unhinged. And I took my sword out of its sheath, and I was, it was like vendetta time, because I had never been taught that you could put illness into remission. I had never been taught that diet mattered. And I had put 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, $200,000 of debt into my training so that I could be duped, right? So it was the whole parental adolescent dynamic rupture that was being played out in my relationship with the medical system. This is very common, right? That we parentify these entities, these institutions, and we have experiences of compliance and defiance with these authorities, right? So that was my drama. And from there, I dove into the research, right? So I was already very comfortable on PubMed, and because I was specialized in prescribing to pregnant women, I was trained, for better or for worse, to know how to read a paper and to know how to debate around like what a paper was ostensibly showing versus what the results actually showed. And you can play that on both sides, of the court. You can play that game. So I just flipped over to the other side, and I started to look into the literature, and I learned about something called psychoneuroimmunology, which I'm sure you know about, and is a discipline that was decades old, like 2 decades old by the time I got there, which was 10 years ago, right? So this was well established. And you can just break down the parts of the word to see that the intention, right? So the teleologic nature of this research was to connect these seemingly disparate disciplines, right? Psycho is your thoughts, your mind, right? With your brain, right? And it's functioning as a transmitter. And, it also sometimes includes endocrinology, right? So your hormones and your immune system. This whole concept was really represented in the literature mostly through the relevance of lifestyle factors, right? So the research would look at things like diet or thought patterns or different, aspects of environmental exposures, and demonstrate that they had direct impact on the symptoms that would make manifest. And that's really where and how I came across the work of Irvin Kirsch, who is one of the world's placebo effect experts. And I started to interest myself in the role that the mind, right? So the thoughts and beliefs played in the placebo effect, because he has exposed through invoking the Freedom of Information Act. So invoking the hidden papers and files that demonstrate the inefficacy of these psychiatric meds. He has exposed those, and he has demonstrated the fact that more than half of what we are calling the effect. So why does somebody think Zoloft or Prozac works, for example? They do because the papers that demonstrate that it doesn't work are hidden. So it's literally, if I was like, go ahead and flip a coin and you hide every time you get tails and you show me all I got was heads, right? So like that's what they're doing, but they're allowed to do this, right? So it's all the nature of the system. It's not broken. It was made this way. And he exposed that the specifically antidepressants, that they not only do not work better than placebo, but that when they work, they are riding what he calls the active placebo effect, which is what happens in your mind and therefore in your body. So it's like a whole pharmacopoeia that starts to unlock when you believe that you're being treated because you have side effects, right? So when you take a medication and you've been entrained by direct-to-consumer advertising in Brazil or New Zealand or America, and you've been told, you might have dry mouth or you might get a headache or you might have some digestive disturbance, and you start taking your medication and you have those side effects, that's often when you actually have an effect. Okay, so what is an effect? An effect is something different from what you were natively experiencing. If we want to get metaphysical about it, I actually think that these medications arrest conscious awareness, right? So what a lot of people describe as feeling more numb, and it's actually welcome. It actually works for them because maybe they were struggling with what they would describe as anxiety or panic or, something that felt so uncomfortable in their system. So numbness is certainly preferable, right? It extinguishes the alarm, but maybe moreover, the awareness of the alarm. These are consciousness altering medications. That's probably why they're called psychotropics, right? So when you believe that it's going to have an effect, it has an effect. Now, is that effect more than if you just took a sugar pill? It is, if that sugar pill doesn't have the same side effects. Okay. So when they compared, let's say, some sort of cardiac med that has similar side effects and let's say an antidepressant, then there's no difference at all. Okay. So, maybe it's still worth it, but then you look at the side effects, and that's where you can come into an awareness and appreciation of how problematic these medications are, that they're the most habit-forming chemicals on the plane, and that they can induce behavior, impulsive behavior that would not otherwise be, experienced, by the patient. So the literature on the placebo and what's called the nocebo effect, right? So the negative beliefs impacts is really pretty compelling. And I'll just mention one study, which was is one of my favorites to demonstrate this, which was in Prozac patients, right? So they were treated to remission, so-called remission. So they would be the types of folks who would say, yeah, Prozac saved my life. It was really helpful. Like, I'm so glad I took it. I don't know where I'd be without it. So they are told that they're going to be randomized to either continue on their same dose of medication that helped them so much, or to a sugar pill. Okay. So what happened at the point of randomization is that both of the groups actually lost clinical effect. Right? So what does that tell us? That tells us that the chemical was not actually doing something beyond what that individual believed it was doing. And when they stopped believing it because they were worried that they might have gotten the sugar pill, it actually stopped conferring what they experienced as a benefit. Right? So that's how the negative belief can have a measurable, statistically significant impact. And the same goes with the positive belief. So if we're just working with belief, then what we need is a ritual, right? So that's what I've come upon. I've publicized a protocol, very basic protocol, for about 8 years now. It's just a lifestyle protocol, right? It's what I did in my practice. It's, what I help folks do if, online, if they are interested in coming off of meds or resolving chronic illness. And I've come to understand that this protocol is really nothing more than a ritual. It is a ritual wherein you enter a belief field, right? So now we've had thousands of people go through Vital Mind Reset. You enter into a belief field. And in my particular case, this belief field is infused by the belief of my mentor, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, who believed himself and proved in 27 years of practice that anything can be healed, that the body doesn't make mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that symptoms are a message from your soul, the message from you to you about you. So when you enter that belief field, then the results that are conferred, you could argue, are a result of the belief that you are now marinating in. So when you can choose a ritual that is side effect free, it might be preferable, right? It might be preferable. And, the potential risks for these psychotropics are so significant, and they're also, it's like nobody can tell you whether you're going to experience them or not, because nobody is what's called risk stratified. Nobody is assessed for whether or not, you're going to be the person who starts on Paxil because of run-of-the-mill work stress and ends up, strangling your child, which I actually know somebody who did that, right? So like the Russian roulette of these meds, the stakes are high, and I'm not trying to be, overly dramatic about it. But if I had known that, right, when I started prescribing, I might have really investigated like what other options I might have had to offer patients, right, beyond just like, run-of-the-mill psychotherapy and psychopharmacology. Because I was not aware of that until I started to do this deeper dive, inspired by my own health crisis. I really felt that experience of like, wow, the wool has been pulled over my eyes, and now I have, the karma of all of these hundreds of women I've prescribed to. It's like blood on my hands that I spent many years, probably on some level, I'm still, working to alchemize that, because I just didn't know. So I don't know that doctors are in a position, to be honest, to offer informed consent. I just don't think they are. And so, that's why we're having this conversation, right? So that through the democratization of information, people can get little drips and drabs, especially in this world of censorship. It'll come to you in some way, somehow, the information that you need if you're receptive to hearing it. Which everyone has their journey. So there's no really, I would never stand here and say nobody should ever do anything with their lives, eat anything, take anything. It's not my business. However, I have become really passionate about knowing what's possible, and how essential it is to simply know what's possible in order to activate your inner compass that might say, hey, yeah, that's for me. Resolving Graves' disease without surgery or radiotherapy. That's for me. Coming off meds after 25 years, that's for me, seeing if recidivistic schizophrenia can be put into remission, right? Like if you don't know it's possible, then you can't activate that inner yes, as easily.
Huge. Thanks for being the permission piece for that. And you mentioned, just lifestyle. I have a similar type of experience. I broke both my legs on a motorcycle. I had an accident in 2006. I got a staph infection after taking all the metal out a year later after the original crash. And I did exactly what I was told. I went to the doctors. I took all the drugs. Even though it doesn't respond to antibiotics, they pumped me full of antibiotics. I lost 15 kilos. I remember I was in hospital. I was fed white bread and Jello as so-called nutrition. And I remember one day I got a point of clarity. Metaphysically, as you mentioned, a download, whatever. And spirit came through and just said, hey, listen, if it is to be, it's up to me. Like there's no one else here that's going to heal you. Okay. You're looking to the doctors and the surgeons and hospitals and the nurses and the drugs. That's not how healing works. And I thought to myself, well, that's weird and absurd. I mean, it's alignment with my philosophy, but still at the same time, that's a bit different. So I went home and I did the breath work, and I did a lot of breath work. And in 3.5 weeks, I healed myself after having had a staph infection for a year and 2 months. So I just want to really point out what Kelly's saying here. We're not saying
I
do
love
this or
that.
do that. Yeah, it was profound. It was a gift from God. And now we teach breath work to hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and they're having spontaneous remissions and instantaneous healings by understanding the power of breath. I'm not healing them; they're healing them. There's a big distinction. It's very important. But I just really want to emphasize what Kelly was saying here, because her path started with a personal challenge, went outside of the traditional system that she was ingrained in, and somewhat blinded by. They're only one way. Had healing. Let's just bring this down. Okay, what are we talking about? Removing 2 things from your diet: gluten and dairy. Hello. I mean, my question is, and I'm not saying remove gluten and dairy. My question is, what is it in your lifestyle at the moment that you don't know is making you sick? And we say just lifestyle medicine. I mean, I've consulted from different medical doctors. One that's stopped her after 17 years of being an MD, prescribing mostly certain things, to being prescribing lifestyle medicine. Tell me about your thoughts. Tell me about your feelings. Tell me about your nutrition. Tell me about your lifestyle. Tell me about your water. And get that down pat, because it's not just about I'm sick or not sick. It's not that black or white. It's to what degree is your soul able to express itself within a beautiful, healthy temple? How do you wake up in the morning feeling refreshed and energized and happy and joyful, and your skin is clear and you feel alert and whatever, right? So I know from personal experience, tens of thousands of patients, it's been missed. There is so much healing and abundance of energy and abundance of health in the small little choices that we make every single day. So I'd love if you can just tell us a little bit more about what some of the pillars that are in your protocol, because I think, from you having done this research for so long and changed your life, and now so many women and people around the world, what are some of the parts in the protocol that you put together? So firstly, what's his name? And tell us a little bit about this protocol. Because I think this will be very useful for people as to, okay, I get it. Now what's in this thing? And could
Yeah.
that work for me? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I will also frame what I'm about to share through the lens of, I guess it could be described as like a Jungian perspective on the human journey, right? Because when I started off, I was just angry and I had healed myself, and I needed to know that, every single person I ever spoke to was aware that they never had to take a medication and here's what they could do instead, right? So it came from this very pragmatic place. And then I started to collect my outcomes because I was on a mission to prove, right? I published papers, I published a case series, I published an IRB approved randomized trial on the protocol. Like, I was really a girl on fire. And since that time, we still offer the protocol. In fact, we certify people in it and all the rest. But since that time, I've come to look at its role, and even my role that I played as a doctor. I'm a woman, and I believe that I played the benevolent father archetype role for my patients. Right? I was, a good dad. What does a good dad do? A good dad looks at you with a knowing gaze that says, you can do this. Go out into the world. I'm going to tell you how, and go. I know you're scared. Go anyway. Right? And does not take no for an answer. Right? So that was the energy, even born of my own woundology. But that was the energy that I brought to my patients. It was like a go big or go home. Don't fucking, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast. Don't waste my time. Right? Like, don't cheat yourself. And you were not offered a second appointment unless you did the protocol without one moment of, veering off course, right? Not one bite of cake. Okay. So it's very, very intense. You could say dogmatic. And I got outcomes in my practice that have, not been matched, at least, in the medical literature anyway. I'm sure they have been in the world through acupuncturists and chiropractors and naturopaths, and I'm sure in your clinics, right? But the people who've taken the time to publish, there was a lot of pioneering, that I did in that realm. But that's what was going on. So I know the protocol itself is not super special. It's an anti-inflammatory diet. It's detox in the form of coffee enemas that I learned specifically from my mentor, the way that he did them. And then there's contemplative practice. So I'm trained in Kundalini yoga meditation. So it's a 3-minute, that's it, commitment a day, right? So it would make the breath work that you did look very ambitious, right? So this is super basic. And there is an energy that says, like, do the damn thing, right? I don't know how else to, like the energy that I hold in the program is one that I think invokes the spine, right? So you could say the inner masculine in the person who is doing it, right? We don't initiate ourselves anymore, right? So men are not initiated, women are not initiated, right? There's the occasional natural childbirth, and maybe you have an experience at war, right? There is not a stewardship from adolescence to adulthood that is in the, first world anywhere. So we are in a moment of self-initiation. Perhaps it's by design. So how do you find your adult spine? You need a ritual, right? And so when you say, I'm going to focus on myself, I'm going to act like I actually give a shit about myself because I'm responsible for this. No one's coming to save me. No one's going to fix my problems. It's exactly what you realized, right? I am responsible for this. You grow your spine and you develop your masculine virtues of commitment, follow through, dedication, strategy, solution-oriented thinking, and clarity of mind, right? And I learned from Jungian analyst Marion Woodman that the etymology of the word discipline is disciple, and that from her perspective, it means the gaze of the teacher who loves you. Right. So it is beautiful to think about like discipline that way rather than a self-flagellating, just do it, just do the damn thing. It is a just do the damn thing. Like there is like a loving, knowing, but also authoritative energy that you bring to yourself. And in that process of taking personal responsibility, you reclaim the power of choice that you have as a human. Because it turns out that the mantra of victim consciousness, which I've said before, I'll say again, is the only human pathology, right? It is the root of all suffering, is the illusion that we are powerless. Okay. It's meant to hurt. It's meant to suck. And everything in your life that you hate and that sucks and hurts has this victim consciousness at its core, wanting to be transmuted, right? So the mantra of victim consciousness is I have to, right? So when you move from I have to I choose to, suddenly you are sovereign, right? Suddenly you are no longer enslaved by this outside locus of control. And you can access that power of choice through your simple, mundane lifestyle experiences. What time are you going to wake up? What are you going to drink as soon as you wake up? What are you going to eat that day? What are you going to do for pleasure? What are you going to do for fun? What are you going to do for movement? What time are you going to go to bed? Who are you going to interact with? All of these choices, there's myriad all day long. When you focus on them, that's like a full-time job, right? So when you engage, as you experience, so when you engage in this kind of self-initiation, it's meant to be your full-time job. The rest of your life fades into the background by necessity so that you can finally orient towards yourself and reposition the central channel of your existence within. And so I have seen that you can you can reclaim that power of choice by simply saying, oh, what I eat for breakfast matters. Like, oh, if I do breath work for an hour, I feel like a totally different human, right? Like, oh, if I go to bed at 9 p.m. instead of 2 a.m., my mind, suddenly I'm not somebody with brain fog, right? Like I used to drink so much coffee, so much, like 6 cups a day. And then I quit coffee, actually way before my, awakening. In 2007, I quit coffee because I did with my then boyfriend, like a juice cleanse, like just for fun. Like I don't even know what we were doing it for. And I had such withdrawal that I was like, forget this. This is not good. I'm not messing with that again. Right. And it was like, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try coffee again. It's been 17 years. I want to see, like what it's like, because I'm now more than a decade and a half later in a process of softening those rigid boundaries, right? Because you invoke that discipline, but if you stay in that dogmatic place for too long, it's like, sours. It sours. And that is something you will intuit when it's the moment for you to soften up. It's the same, and I call that softening, neutralizing rejection, right? So you need a big no. You need rigid boundaries. You need to cultivate safety inside of yourself that way. But then over time, that safety is actually conferred through the more nuanced assessment of what works in every given moment, right? So anyway, so I tried coffee again and I was like, oh my God. It was like, I was shocked at how I was like, my heart was racing. Like I felt like I was like leaving my body. And I think I had it for like 3 days. And then I was like, okay, forget this. And then I stopped drinking it. And I like literally went through withdrawal, right? So I felt nauseous. I felt, it's like most of the world is walking around either intoxicated or withdrawing from this substance, thinking, I don't care what people do, that's fine, but thinking that it's their personality. Because when I used to drink coffee, I used to think, oh, I'm an irritable, tired person. If you don't establish what your baseline is at some point, and I recommend 1 month of your adult life, that's it, just take 1 month to establish what your baseline looks like, you don't even have you haven't even met yourself. You haven't even shaken your own hand, right? Let alone explored the deeper recesses of like some of your emotional, dynamics in your life or how you're relating to your purpose. Like you can't even go there when you have brain fog and joint pain and diarrhea and gas and bloating and insomnia and your hair is falling out. Like there is a Maslow's hierarchy of like needs, and you cannot ascend that when you are chronically distracting yourself, because I do believe that illness meets needs. And perhaps it is, the benevolent intent of the part of you that is attached to your illness that you stay distracted, right? So it's all fine. It's all the way it's supposed to be. But again, that's why I'm so passionate about just knowing what's possible so that you can orient around that month-long experiment at some point in your life and you can show up to it, right? So when we run this program, we don't want people there who are, half in, half out. We want people there who are ready to grow their spine, because it's fun. It's fun to watch that transformation. I enjoy it. And I only do things that I enjoy in my career at this point. And that's, and that's what it takes. It takes a readiness. And I've not really been able to unpack, what is readiness, right? Like, why is somebody ready when they're ready and not like a moment before? And the closest I've come after literally years of observing this, and observing when people are not, including myself, when I'm not ready to have the conversation, with the family member. I'm not ready to give up the thing. I'm not ready to move the house. Like, and then one morning I wake up and I am like, what is that? It's very, ephemeral. And what I've found is that there comes a point where movement in the direction of change feels like a relief. Even though there are fears that attend it, even though sometimes we make change mean that we were wrong before, and now we're right. And so change gets really loaded with risk. It still feels like relief to move in the direction of something new. And that's it, right? Whenever you get to that place, like, that you will be expanding your definition of who you are and how powerful you understand yourself to be.
I love this conversation, and so much of it has come down to decision and come down to the ritual. You say, I really want to emphasize this because if you see and understand your body to be a temple, that we can see and we can respect it as the only place the spirit gets to live. I love what you said earlier. It was something like the body is the quote unquote, and I'll paraphrase, the barometer of the soul. What you're experiencing in this human reality is through your body. The body never lies. You have to realize the body never lies. It tells you exactly what you need to know. And a friend and a physician of mine said that the disease is the cure. And I thought, the first time he said that, I said, that's absurd. What are you saying? I went to school for 6.5 years at university to learn this. Are you telling me that what? No. But honestly, yeah, your body's telling you exactly what you need to know. How are you honoring it? And where are you not honoring it? And if you can come to terms with the fact that this vessel is telling you exactly what you need to know, and then you deploy a ritual. Like this morning, I've had an hour and a half of me time. My son is sleeping. We're here talking. I've done me. And if I don't do that, I can't show up as the best father. I can't show up as the best leader. I can't do the things that I want in my life. And so I think in many instances, this is turning the conversation upside down. So the question that you might ask yourself, that I'm asking myself, is where am I not caring for myself? What would it be like Kelly said, for 30 days? That's a blip on the radar in the entire human experience of time. What would it be like for 30 days to cut gluten, cut dairy? Same thing with me. I have a protocol that is so tailored to me that the tiniest action gives me the greatest amount of energy. I know what I do in the morning with my movement, with my breath, with my prayer, with my water. Dr. Emoto showed us this. This is not just an element. Ladies and gentlemen, this is way more than just an element of water. So I think I hope this is dawning on you, because Kelly's experience and transformation came from seeing a naturopath. And that's nothing to do with just naturopathy in itself, even though it's a powerful art. I hope every person out there has a really good naturopath in their life, but it comes with a change. It comes with a decision. And from that decision comes action. And I used to be just the same, Kelly. When I was in clinical practice, if my patients would not do the things that they said they wanted to do to get well, I would lovingly dismiss them, because I'm not going to be the one standing on the sideline and watching them fail themselves, aka I fail them. So every person in this moment has a sovereign choice to decide, what do you want to do right now? Do you want to improve your health and well-being, your vitality as you age? My biological age is 30 and I'm in my 40s. I love it. And I not just love it for me, I love it because I can show up for my mission. I can play with my son. I can do these things. How important are those things for you right now? If it meant dropping the gluten or the alcohol. Like, I've quit alcohol because it ran in my family for generations. If I don't do it, what am I going to do? Pass it on to my son? Not cool. No, not okay for me. But then again, maybe my standards and decisions are different. I don't want to project my decision-making process and the sacredness that I've imbued into my life around my body onto you guys, but a decision is appropriate. And we'll hear a little bit more about the protocol in a moment, Kelly, if you don't mind. I want to ask you, I've got two last questions for you. One, what role, and because I've seen this a lot. I saw it with my patients and I see it now with our students in the events that we run. And it's kind of like, okay, I want to drop coffee. I want to cut the alcohol. I want to drop the sugar, the processed foods, whatever. But then this funny thing pops up, right? And it's a thing called emotions. And I say this to my students. I say, most people, when they have an addiction to, say, sugar, they don't have the sugar all the time because they're deliberately trying to give themselves cancer or trying to be, harmful to themselves. They're doing it so that they get that dopamine hit in that moment to feel better. So we don't have the addiction or have the sugar or have the coffee to be mean. We do it to feel better in the moment. So the emotion feeds the action. What role have you seen that emotions play in improving our health and well-being?
Yes. So this has been the focus of the better part of the past couple of years for me, because what I found was, I could support people in moving beyond prescription meds and chronic illness labels. And even though I have not taken psychiatric meds, I could very much empathize with what it is to develop functional addictions. Right. So I certainly don't believe that addiction is a disease, because I don't believe that any mental illness is a disease. And I also believe that we all have, some more socially acceptable than others, means of coping with the pain of the human experience. Right.
Mhm.
And for me, it was absolutely workaholism. 100%. I mean, I arguably missed the first couple of years of my children's lives because I was getting so many of my needs for worth and importance through my work, right? While I was, virtue signaling that I was doing all of this important work to save others and save the world and save anonymous children and whatever, it was meeting needs. So we meet our needs, and addictions work until they don't, right? But they are fundamentally, they fundamentally stem from an immaturity, right? An inability to feel feelings willingly, right? So it's either the experience, I think of like numbness and overwhelm, right? So when you struggle with numbness, which was much more the spectrum that I lived on, you want stimulus, right? So the 6 cups of coffee a day, or the celebratory drink out at dinner with a friend, filling your life with distraction. When you struggle with overwhelm, you might engage in similar behaviors to mitigate the emotions that you can't capacitate. Right. So you feel stressed when you get home from work. So you have the drink, or you smoke the cigarette, or you look at the porn, or you shop, or whatever. And it offers you a mitigating strategy. When we inquire as to the benevolent intent of the parts of us that actually drive these decisions, we find that they're there for us, right? Right. Like if I talked, I believe in parts, and I'm very passionate about internal family systems and parts work. And if I talk to the part of me that's called like a manager part, right, who puts out fires, right, and I say, why is it that you had to stay up till, you thought it was good to stay up till 2 a.m. writing the blog, for example, I might find that the intent is, when I keep asking, like, what do I get when I finish the blog? What do I get when people like the blog? What do I get when people say that it impacted them? What do I get when, right? I am somebody who impacts people. Like, what do you just keep asking, what do I get then? And down beneath it is like a universal desire, right? I get to feel loved. I get to feel safe. I get to feel worthy. I get to feel secure. So when we demonize either the part that wants to do the bad thing, or part of why I don't subscribe to, Alcoholics Anonymous rhetoric, and not that I would deny that it has helped and does help many people, chiefly because of the community aspects, in my opinion. But I don't believe in demonizing the object, right? So the alcohol, the heroin, whatever it is, once you infuse it with that kind of power, you are projecting your own rejected parts onto that thing. And you're in relationship with that thing in what I call the erotic caress of the enemy. You become obsessed with this thing that you are rejecting. And remember when I said earlier that I had coffee again after all those years? That was a part of this movement towards integrating that which I say is bad, right? So including like things like gluten and dairy and sugar, right? When you go through saying, recognizing, oh, this is bad, there is shame around the part of you that might still want the thing, right? So what about the part of me that might still want to eat the bagel or the pizza? I have to make that part bad and wrong. Pretend it's not there. And then relate to that part through the bad and wrong bagel or pizza, right?
Mm.
So that is not sustainable, and it drives addiction, right? And it drives the white knuckling phenomenon that says, I will not have the thing, right? So until you can find another way to offer the part that is functionally relating to this bad thing, quote unquote, on the outside, you've got to like find a better yes, right? So I stopped drinking alcohol about a year and a half ago or so, and only ever drank socially, never had any consequences. Nobody ever, like a spider on my ear, nobody ever said, like, oh, Kelly, I think you should, it was nothing like that. It was just an awareness that we are in a moment collectively where if we don't develop, I think perhaps especially women, but I don't know if that's the only perspective I can engage. If we don't develop our superpowers, right? If we don't learn how to perceive and interact with the unseen, just to be cryptic about it, then we're not actually going to be playing the game. We're going to be left out of the game. And so I thought, well, if I am altering my consciousness at any point, then I am opting out of my honed perception, and I want to be on point, right? That's why I stopped. So, because I had a bigger yes, right? So when you have the bigger yes, you're not just running away from the scary bad thing. You are right. Like you could tell me, I'm sure, many yeses that you experience by not drinking. And it's not just that you're not passing on the horrible plight and burden, right? Because I certainly have that in my family line too. It's not just that you're not passing it on. There are things that you get to have and experience that are probably the same things that the part of you who would have otherwise reached for the beer want. So you find other ways to satisfy the benevolent intent, right? The goal of the goal that part has. And this is the real work, right? This is the real work, is developing emotional intimacy, learning how to relate to yourself, to recall your projections from people and places and things on the outside that give you charge, that you're obsessed with or that you hate. This is the real sovereignty that we begin to explore, but I just don't know how possible it is to do that work before you have basic command of this vessel, right? So I wouldn't recommend, doing plant medicine or honestly even parts work or somatic experiencing or family constellation or any of these amazing tools before you know what to eat every day, before you know when you feel best, what time to go to bed and wake up, before you know that you need an hour and a half before you father, right? Like get that on lock and then start the, self-exploration, because otherwise I see people get stuck in these loops that actually reify that same message we started out with, which is there's something wrong with you. A lot of these self-help modalities can translate into that, and they can continue to give you the sense that something's actually wrong with you. You need another retreat. You need another book. Better find another healer, right? And there are even aspects of integrative and functional medicine that can keep you really arrested in that place. So until you have this sense that the good news and the bad news is there's nothing wrong with you. It's kind of bad news, right? On some level, because we find some validation in that the gaze that says, yeah, you were messed up. It's called bipolar disorder, right? Or whatever. And when you realize and recognize and fully own, there's nothing wrong with me. Now what? Right? Now what choices do you make? And that's when, the big adventure of your life really begins.
Beautiful. We might have to jump on again, Kelly, and do this, because I want to unpack the conversation about superpowers. I mean, now we're just scratching the surface, but we're getting to the fundamentals. You're so right. Okay, anyway, we'll talk about it another time. let's just let this one drop. You cannot access your superpowers, your supernatural abilities until you get the fundamentals right. You know this if you've studied spirituality from, around the world. It's always, what's the first step of spiritual enlightenment is purifying the vessel, purifying your life. Okay, lots to talk about. Let's see if we can do this again. I've got a last question for you, Dr. Kelly. This is one straight off the cuff. Are you ready?
Yes.
Goes like this. I want you to now imagine that the entire world, every sentient being alive, is here present, watching and looking, ready to hear your message to the world. Whenever you're ready, take a breath, and please do tell us, what is your message to the world right now?
We are just getting started. And everything that you have been certain is at the root of the problem is going to be exposed as a perfect design for you to claim your birthright, which is vitality and embodied pleasure and the specific magic that is available through this human vessel.
Straight from the heart. Thank you for your time. It's been absolutely special. Now, before you guys move on, please, if this has been useful, share this with as many people as you can. This could be an opportunity to help someone else as well. And I want to just bring this up. www.kellybroganmd.com and Instagram is kellybroganmd. In one word, kellybroganmd. Go there, check out the program, check out her work, follow her if you've resonated with this. And do take the time to look at some of the books that we've discussed. There's the protocol. If you're interested in protocol, go and look it up. The Surprising Path Beyond Depression. So the book is called Own Yourself, and also A Mind of Your Own, Kelly Brogan MD. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for speaking to so many aspects of yourself from such an honest and vulnerable place. Thank you for giving us permission to see what we can do in our lives to change and transform. And again, listeners and viewers, if you've resonated with this, go back and listen to it again, take some notes, and reach out to Kelly and her team to see if they can help you take your life, your health to the next level. Once again, Kelly, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.